Have you ever wondered why video games are released on a Tuesday?
Sega!
Some people will say it's the day after stock arrives at the store, but in reality it has more to do with a blue hedgehog. Sega launched Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on November 24th, 1992, a Tuesday, which they dubbed Sonic Tuesday. While it wasn't the first video game to ever release on a Tuesday by far, it was the most significant Tuesday launch, which set a precedent. Sega was knee-deep in a battle with Nintendo over which console manufacturer would dominate the 16-bit console era. Sega's Genesis had been doing well against Nintendo's Super Nintendo, but Sega wanted to pull ahead of the competition. The first Sonic the Hedgehog game is what brought Sega to a place to be able to compete with Nintendo, and Sega knew that for the sequel, they had to go bigger. Sega had planned, at the time, traditional mall tours, commercials, and the such, but Sega of America's marketing team, led by Al Nielsen and Ellen Van Buskirk of Sega of America's marketing team, knew that they had to push the envelope. Just days before the meeting, where Sega of America's marketing team had to present their pitch for how to market Sonic 2, they were unhappy with how typical their approach was. But on the 11th hour, it hit them. Sonic Tuesday, the first significant simultaneous international release for a video game. At the time, new games didn't come out on a set day. One store would get it before another, and who knows when the game actually came out. But Sega wanted to treat it like a Hollywood blockbuster, make Sonic appear everywhere. Sega had to get retailers to play ball for this all to work, and Nintendo was known to turn on retailers that worked with other companies. Sega had worked to open doors in the past, and now was the time for them to collect on that investment. Sega held their first ever Sega Summit in 1992. It was retailers only and held right before the summer CES, giving Sega staff time to wine and dine major industry players before the more public event. At this event, Sega planned to wow the retailers with their next phase of games, and then ultimately sell them on Sonic Tuesday. At this event, Echo the Dolphin was shown off for the first time. The rest of Sega's lineup was also shown, and retailers were impressed, but when they thought the presentation was over, a costumed Sonic mascot rushed into the room and Sonic 2 was shown off for the first time. Here, Sega announced to the retailers their plans for Sonic Tuesday. The day after the main conference, Sega was meeting with the retailers to have them buy inventory for what was shown off, and to hopefully agree to partake in Sonic Tuesday. Sega met with Toys R Us first, which at the time was one of, if not the biggest video game retailer. Toys R Us didn't know that they were the first to have a one-on-one. They asked Tom Kalinske, then president of Sega of America, if the other retailers were in for Sonic Tuesday. Tom bluffed that everyone was in big. Tom Kalinske knew that for Sonic Tuesday to work, he needed Toys R Us to be a part of it. Toys R Us decided they were not to be outdone and placed the largest order. The other retailers fell in line shortly after. With the American retailers in place, Sega of America had to actually figure out how to distribute the game. To get it to every store across the world at the same time was no easy feat. Sega decided to get this done, it would have to be delivered by air. While it was expensive, air shipping was effective and added to the showmanship. With all the pieces in place for Sonic Tuesday, it seemed like nothing could go wrong. There's one thing that Sega of America was not able to predict. Despite being part of the overall same company, Sega of Japan was not happy being second place to their American counterparts. And the past few years had been a massive success for the Americans, while in Japan, Sega had not made the same progress. Out of seemingly nowhere, Sega of Japan informed Sega of America that Sonic 2 will release on the Friday before Sonic Tuesday in Japan. After carefully crafting a simultaneous international release, Sega of Japan would rather shoot the entire company in the foot just to stick it to the Americans. Sega of America could do nothing to change their minds. They decided to spin it as Japan getting a special early look. While for most, Sonic Tuesday was about getting the game wherever they purchased games at the same time as the rest of the world. But Sega had one more master plan to make Sonic 2 the blockbuster to dethrone Nintendo. Sega had crafted a plan to create a video showcasing Sonic 2 being bought around the world that day, and then sending the video to Newsroom. This was done through a satellite system. This video would be used in newsrooms to control the conversation about video games this upcoming Christmas, and placing Sonic 2 at the forefront of it all. The American launch event in New York was at the Toys R Us. There was also an event in LA, in London, in France, and in Tokyo. But instead of being filmed that same day, the Tokyo version was filmed on the Friday the game launched. Sega would shoot the footage and then send it over satellite right after shooting, doing what is called a live edit. This edited together footage was then sent to the press to show how popular Sega was, cinching the upcoming holiday season. In America, Tom Kalinske, president of Sega of America, was present at the event in New York City at Toys R Us. The Toys R Us, they brought out a litany of teen stars, the main one being Dustin Diamond from Saved by the Bell. Tom then gave a speech about how popular Sonic 1 was the year before, how Sega Genesis is the best 16-bit console, and how Sonic 2 will sell millions across the world. He goes over the sales figures of the games from just that day. The rest of the video is just a compilation of interviews and greatest moments from the events around the world. In the United Kingdom, they decked out double-decker buses with a Sonic overlay. Inside those buses were Sega Genesises, which in the UK was called the Mega Drive, playing Sonic 2. These buses were sent to schools for the children to try out the new game. In Japan, they had a funny-looking Sonic, and thus Sega started a tradition of international simultaneous releases. While some game launches following Sonic Tuesday didn't immediately follow the Tuesday launch, they did simultaneous releases, eventually leveling out on Tuesdays. The next major simultaneous release had to be Mortal Kombat, which released on Mortal Kombat Monday.